God create good and evil as per Isaiah 45:7? And
can we allocate an hour each?
We don't have an hour on this one. Okay. I think we need to read Isaiah 45:7 first. But the translation we choose is going to have a big impact on this one, which is one of the problems with this. Isaiah 45:7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all of these things. However, if you use a different translation, including New King James or ESV, it says, I form light and create darkness. I make well-being and create calamity. I am the Lord who does all these things. So you can see that difference in word there changes that sentence a lot. So, where are we going to start? I'm going to start at the end there.
So we have to define what we mean by evil, because if we don't understand that, we're lost. First and foremost, if people think what they mean by evil is death and destruction and things like that, well, clearly the judgment of God does all that. So, for example, in the days of Noah, there was one family didn't get killed. However many other people were on the earth, guess what? They did. Isaiah, when he's speaking, is speaking from the perspective of seeing the land being overrun by the Assyrian Empire. Lachish, second biggest city in Israel, has fallen. If you go to the British Museum, you'll see the pictures of the captives from Lachish with dire tortures and things happening to them, eyes being put out, and well, I won't go into it all. But clearly things that we would say is evil, and yet that is judgment, because they were told way back at the time of Moses and Joshua, choose this day who you'll serve. If you don't serve me, disaster will come upon the land. So if you say, does God bring calamity? Yes. Does that make God do evil? No, because evil has to be determined as being something that means opposite to the will of God. God can't do evil because God can't do opposite to the will of his own self. Does that mean that, everything's going to be sweet and light for everybody? Well, no. In the future, there'll be plagues. In the future, there'll be wars. In the future, there'll be a wormwood hits the earth, a third of the people on the planet killed. But that is part and parcel of the judgment of God and part of the rebellion that people have against God. So it makes it very difficult, doesn't it? Because it's a very emotive term. And I'm sure people will quote another verse that says can't do evil. And of course, that's correct. But we have to determine what we mean by evil for the conversation to make sense.
Yeah. Does anyone want to? Oh, we've got.
Yeah. Sorry.
And then Cliff, because you haven't had a lot to say yet. Judith first thing, then Cliff.
Like Luke said rightly at the beginning, it really, when you study a verse like this or study the Bible, there is no one translation that is correct. And anyone that says there is only one and the rest aren't godly, then that's wrong, because we can clearly see King James says he creates evil, but the ESV, New King James, say calamity, and the NIV says disaster. And there's various other scriptures in the Old Testament that does the same thing. So you really need to read various translations and get a good concordance like the Strong's and look it up. So like David here said, evil in the scripture is got a word, it's ra, and it can mean moral evil such as wickedness and sin, but it can also mean, and most of the time it does, harmful natural events, calamity, adversity, affliction, disaster. So God, we always judge scripture against other scriptures and the Bible as a whole. So you can't take one verse out of context. You need to read it within the context of what Isaiah is talking about. And he was talking about Cyrus it was going to bring judgment on Israel's enemies. So God was using that situation for Israel's good. So he uses situations for our good. Like Romans said, he brings about all things for our good and for his purposes. So we can clearly see that God is light. He is not evil. But the absence of God brings darkness. The absence of good is evil, because by default it's not God. But is God bringing that? He's not Zeus striking the earth with a lightning rod. And that's what some people have: Old Testament striking God, New Testament loving God. But if you read the scriptures as a whole, that's not true. And if you dig into the words, God doesn't he is not evil, he is not wicked, but he uses events for our good, or he permits it, as in the case of Job. Or if we step out of his will, there's consequences.
Which is what happened for Israel. That's what the judgment was, when it stepped outside of God's will. I heard a great analogy once about evil. That evil isn't a thing so much. It's the absence of good, but also it's like rust doesn't exist without metal. Rust isn't a thing. It's corroded metal, and evil isn't a thing outside of good. It's an inversion of good. It's when So you can't define evil without defining good. So which is interesting, because you'll have people in the world today who will very readily say so and so is evil, but yet they'll never agree on the definition of an ultimate good. Which it just goes to show, if you have a moral law that is fixed, then you have to have a moral lawgiver who is also fixed. And it's an interesting discussion to have with people sometime. If they'll call something evil, yet they won't deny the existence of true. They'll deny the existence of true good, because you can't have one without the other. You can't call somebody evil without agreeing on what good is, and you can only agree on what good is by having something fixed and unmovable. Right, God. Cliff.
Yeah, in the Garden of Eden there was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I think Dave hit it on the head when he talked about the will of God. When man disobeyed God, evil came. And it's all about choice, the ability to choose. And when mankind chooses to not do God's will or what God says, evil is a result of it. So God does not create evil, but it's the ability to choose between good and evil that falls upon man.
Because love can't be forced. If we have no choice, then there's no real love.
Even Satan was created good.
Well, I was going to ask that question to you. I was going to ask you, Alan, but didn't God create Satan?
Yeah, he did. And he was good when he was created.
Yes.
But in fact, I don't know if that's right. Ezekiel 28, you were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till unrighteousness was found in you. So it was a matter of exercising choice there.
Yeah, so I think that's probably covered that one as much as we need to cover it. But I think the encouragement Judith gave in there and what my dad gave there is, first of all, we need to define what evil is. And if evil is going against the will of God, then God can't do evil. So what does that mean about this verse? And as Judith said, you can't just take a verse out of context in one translation. You've always got to read around. You've got to understand the chapter it's in, the book it's in, but also the translation that you're reading. And, just because it says it in the Old King James doesn't make it right. In fact, in quite a few cases it makes it wrong, but that's another discussion for another time. Sorry, I like poking the King James bubble with you.
But it was good enough for St. Paul.
Yeah, well, Paul used the new King James, didn't he? I mean, of course. Yeah.
And he spoke in these and thous.
He did.